Okay, we'd be recording for 250 session or unit, I believe unit 3. So we did non-electronic acoustic modifications in unit 1. Then unit 2 we covered ANSI testing, A through Z. And now this week we're starting on fitting methods. Now you've had fitting methods in 150. This is mainly purpose to go over the fitting methods just so we're all singing off the same page. And you know the reason why I say that is because the development of real ear grew along with the development of fitting methods. They're very, very much intertwined, and one influenced the other. So many times when I do presentations on fitting methods and real ear together, because it's really so. And also it's always good to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So you've had fitting methods in 150, and let's kind of take a bit of a review of those things, and you'll hear it from a different person, and because you had fitting methods by someone else last year, I'm sure, and that way you get you can hear it from a different perspective. So I will we'll be recording. I'm going to share screen here, and we'll go into the notes first. And here's a PowerPoint slide of the same thing. And I'll highlight this one here just to show it to you. And you've got fitting methods and real ear measurements. It seems like we're playing poker here. You've got 3 decks, 3 things on a card deck. The way I'm looking at it is early fitting methods were verified by functional gain. And that's what we looked at a couple of weeks ago in ANSI testing. Then came early real ear, which we're going to cover afterwards, and then came today's real ear. So on the left you have functional gain, meaning behavioral gain. You tested the person's thresholds under headphones, then you took the headphones off and you put a hearing aid in his ear, and you set him in front of a speaker, and you played warble tones, and the A's represent aided thresholds. Then came real ear, where instead of behaviorally measuring somebody's thresholds twice, aided versus unaided, now you're looking at insertion gain. And then today's real ear is using in situ output. So we're going to just take a look at all of those. But this slide here should highlight for you why we have fitting methods plural, why there's an S after the word method. We don't have the fitting method. We have fitting methods, plural. And you know why it's a plurality of methods? Because the ear is different from the eye. Now just think about this for a second. You're going to the optometrist. You're going to get glasses. You're going to get a prescription of glasses. I'll stop sharing so you can just see my ugly mug. So I'm going to the optometrist or to the optician to get glasses. And one by one they're going, how does that look? Well, that's kind of blurry. How does that look? Oh, it's getting better. How does that look? Yeah, that's good. No, it's getting blurry again. Go back to this one. Yeah, that's good. All right, healed. Next eye. It's either done right or wrong. There's no gray area, really. It's correct or incorrect. So with vision, it's the fitting method, singular. It's just that they have their way of prescribing glasses. But the ear is so very different. And the reason why is because of this picture. Look at the eye on the left. Light isn't properly focused on the retina. In yellow, that retina is like film, and that changes light into electricity, and electricity is the language your brain understands. So with vision loss, you go to the dollar store or you go to the optometry shop, you get glasses. You put them on. You refocus the light properly so it's getting to the back of the eyeball. And if that's done, God's in his heaven and all is well with the world. So what you can see here is that vision loss is conductive vision loss. If all hearing loss was conductive, okay, if all hearing loss was due to excess wax or middle ear infection, then we would have one fitting method. It would either be done right or wrong. Well, the difference with the ear, and look what it says in white at the bottom. The hair cells of the cochlea are the retina of the ear. So if we want vision to become more like our field, you'd have to go up to someone and go, scratch the back of his eyes, and now go ahead and wear glasses. Because that's what our field is. Our field is sensory neural loss, where the damage isn't a blockage of sound getting to where it's got to go. It's not a conductive hearing loss. Only 5% of hearing loss is conductive. And when conductive hearing loss people wear hearing aids, they're happier than pigs and you know what. They have no problems with the hearing aid at all. They like the hearing aids, okay? Sensory neural is different because the hair cells themselves, the retina, in quotes, itself of the ear is what's damaged. And when that happens, then you have a matter of philosophy. It's a matter of your faith. It's a matter of your belief, your religion. How do you feel that you want to fit this person? What do you think is the right way to fit it? Because look what I made yellow here. The scala media, the hair cell region. And that corresponds to the retina of the ear. So in 95% of hearing loss, it is the hair cells that are damaged, leading to sensory neural loss. So vision loss is like conductive loss. Okay, the challenge is simple, it says here. Simply mechanically overcome the transmission problem because the retina and hair cells would be fine. Okay, and that's with conductive loss. The problem is here. So hearing aids don't grow new hair cells. Perfect hearing looks like this, impaired looks like that. And we all know that when that happens, now watch this slide carefully. This damage here on the right leads to this. And now look at this slide and absorb it carefully because this is why we have fitting methods. This slide right here. Look at your decibels from 0 to 100. And now look at the vertical axis. That's your perception. So this is physical acoustics on the horizontal. This is psychoacoustics on the vertical. And when you look at the red 45-degree angle line, you're looking at normal hearing. And so with normal hearing, 10 to 20 sounds soft. With normal hearing, 50 to 60 sounds comfortable. With normal hearing, 100 sounds too loud. But when you've got hair cell damage, when you have hair cell damage, okay, when you've got this situation on the right, you are now in the blue line territory. Because now 50 to 60 sounds soft, and yet 100 sounds too loud. So the lines converge, the lines meet, and that is the mother and that is the father of hearing aid fitting methods. That's why they were born. Because hearing aids need to amplify soft sounds by a lot, average sounds by less, and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. So the gain has to constantly change in hearing aids, and that's why you have a course called compression, which is trying to deal with what the fitting methods are asking for. This is a way of looking at the same slide as this, okay, only now we're adding frequency to it. So here's a hearing loss sloping down on the right, on the left here, sloping down your typical Joe Blow presbycusis. And now look at the right-hand picture. See the bottom blue curve? That's minimal audible pressure. That's the softest it takes to hear all the different frequencies with one ear under a headphone. And these decibels here are, of course, in dBSPL. Okay? That's why the curve is a curve. That's why it's bent. Because the resonances of our outer and middle ears help us hear these frequencies the best. And then we can't hear the lows quite as well. And you recall from previous courses, this blue bottom line here is called MAP, minimal audible pressure. And you know that MAP is, capital letters, bold-faced, italics, is 0 dB HL. So this bottom, this top 0 dB on the left on your audiogram has these different decibels built into it. And that's why your audiometers are calibrated every year. So that 1,000 hertz at 0 dB, look where my cursor is, that 0 there really is this many right here. And 500 hertz at 0, look at the top left, at 0, really is almost 10, if you can see, about 9. And 125, you can't, or 250. 250 at 0 is really about 20. So those differences are built in. Anyway, with sensory neural loss, the floor is raised, look at the red line, and yet the ceiling of loudness tolerance isn't. So this person's dynamic range is smaller. Just like this person's dynamic range is smaller. It goes from 55 to 100 when normally it's from 0 to 100. Same picture shown here, only this one's got frequency added into it. And again, looking at this slide here, a normal dynamic range from 0 to 120, we're soft, average, loud. Now with hearing loss, you've got the reduced dynamic range, and the red hasn't changed much, okay? So soft sounds have to be lifted by a lot. Average, the blue, you don't provide as much gain, and loud sounds, you barely provide any gain at all. And that is seen by the changed arrows here. More gain for soft sounds, less gain for average, less gain for louder still. Here's a way of looking at it on the audiogram. Normal hearing on the left, uncomfortable at the bottom, most comfortable loudness in the middle, dynamic range is big. Now you're looking at a reduced dynamic range, which is why the audiogram is a stupid gram, because now this we call the top here the floor and the bottom here the ceiling, uncomfortable loudness. But so notice uncomfortable loudness here is the same as it is on the left. It's just that the floor is elevated and the MCL, as is typical, is somewhere in the center. Okay, now let's look at our notes. Go to the notes, and the top of our notes here are reed fitting methods for where we've covered so far. First of all, why do we have so many hearing aid fitting methods in the first place? It's because the retina of the ear itself is damaged. Most hearing loss is sensory neural. If most optometry clients had retinal damage, optometry and audiology would be more similar. Most vision loss is conductive. The eyeball is simply too long or too short. This is why with hearing aids, we have two main goals in fitting. Now put a star by this one. Hearing aids have to do two things. One, provide gain for the loss, and two, increase signal to noise ratio. Two things, whereas glasses don't, okay? Glasses need to restore normal vision. Hearing aids have to not only provide gain for the hearing loss, but they also have to help separate speech from background noise. And that's made very difficult because of hair cell damage. And when you've got hair cell damage, you can't separate frequencies close together anymore. Your frequency resolution is gone. Your comb no longer has 100 teeth. Now your comb has 10 teeth. And that may be stylish for certain hairstyles, but it isn't the best for all hairstyles, if you know what I mean. And so hearing aids, because of hair cell damage, they have to do two things: provide gain and also increase signal, speech to noise ratio. The level of speech compared to noise. Okay, fitting methods only address goal number 1. It's very important to realize that. Fitting methods are only talking about how much gain to provide. Fitting methods do not, repeat, not talk about signal to noise ratio. They're not addressing that at all. You want to make sure that the maximum power output does not exceed listeners' uncomfortable loudness. You want to give enough gain for the listener to comfortably hear conversational speech. And lastly, you want to provide the right shape of frequency response for the person's hearing loss. In other words, if you've got something like this, okay, going down here, obviously you want to improve the treble more than improve the bass. Obviously, okay? So let's look at this. Reduced dynamic range. Look at the green at the top. Look at the guy's hearing loss at 50. So his left ear has 50 decibel hearing thresholds. How much, and now here comes a sound of 5 dB, the green. You see that green there at 5 dB? If I wanted to make this green 5 dB here, if I want to make that audible to the person, how much do I amplify it by? The full degree of the loss. Here, I'll go to here. I'd want to take this line and I'd want to move it all the way to here. You get it? I'd want to lift it by the full degree of the hearing loss. And now let's say the yellow line, average sound, look where it is, at 60. What's average conversational speech? About 60. So how much is this yellow line that I'm touching here? Okay, you can see it move. Okay, it's audible to the guy, but barely audible. It's very soft. So how much do you want to lift it by? This much. So when I'm lifting this yellow line from here to here, I'm not lifting it by as much as I did the green line from here to here, am I? You see what I'm saying? And that's why as the loudness of the sound coming into the hearing aid increases, the hearing aid has to back off. Look at the red. Here's the red line. How much am I going to want to lift the red line? Not by much at all. Look at this. Barely at all. I barely want to touch it. You see? So look what it says here in typed writing. Reduced dynamic range requires different amount of gain for different input levels. Soft inputs, you want to amplify by the full degree of the hearing loss. Average inputs, you want to amplify by half the degree of the hearing loss. And loud inputs, you want to amplify by little or nothing at all. Same story as is told here. Okay, same story. I'm just now here I'm talking in Polish and here I'm talking in German. Okay, different language saying the same thing. And here's another way of looking at it. Okay, here's a hearing loss going down on the left, and I'll make it bigger. Okay, so the hearing loss on the left sloping down. And now look at the 5 decibel sound, this dotted line here. How much would I want to amplify that by? The full degree of the loss. So now when you're looking at this line where my cursor is, you can see I've lifted it above the guy's hearing levels because I've amplified this straight 5 dB sound by the full degree of the loss. And now that 5 dB sound is all audible to the person. And let's flip the audiogram right side up. Let's just twist things so that more is going up. And so this right-hand picture is showing you the very same thing. Here's 5 dB sounds from 250 to 500 all the way to 8,000. I'd want to lift them up where they belong. I'd want to amplify by the full degree of the hearing loss. Okay, but unfortunately most sounds aren't 5 dB. When sounds come into the hearing aid, it's usually speech. And speech is between 60 and 70 decibels SPL, and it's between 50 and 60 decibels HL. Now, I would really remember that. I would write that down if you haven't got it in your head. If you do, great. What's average conversational speech? 60 to 70 decibels SPL. What's average conversational speech in HL? 50 to 60. Okay, just keep it in your head always. That's just a good anchor. Now, so if my input speech is 50 to 60 dB HL, do you think I can lift that by the full degree of the loss? Hell no, we won't go. Because how much did I lift 50 over here? When you're looking at 50 where my cursor is, look at 4,000 hertz. I've raised it from 5 to 75. Okay, so I've amplified it by 70 decibels. If the input speech is 50 to 60, and I add 70 to that, I'm going to be topping out at 120 plus. So I can't. Most comfortable loudness. It's a very subjective speech test. Depends heavily on specific instructions. Results can vary. I always give my instructions. So let's talk about MCL. What is a person's most comfortable loudness? You see, because I want speech to be amplified, so it's most comfortably loud for the person. And if I want speech amplified, I can't lift speech by the full degree of the loss, or it's going to sound uncomfortably loud. So I can't. I have to back off, Jack. Well, let's look at MCL. I always give my clients an instructions like this. Pretend I'm your radio. If you had to listen to me all day, God forbid, turn me to a volume you think that would be just right. You can bracket like pure tone testing too. Go deliberately above and below the client's level to make sure that the client makes you, no, that's too loud. No, that's too soft. Good, you want the client to be fussy because you want the client like Goldilocks. You want the porridge to be just right. Not too cold, not too hot, okay? And when you're doing MCL tests, it's good to be picky, because then you get your client to direct you. I always tell my clients, I'm the servant, you're the radio. Turn me up or you've got the control. You turn me up or down until I sound just right. Anyway, good idea, by the way. This is just FYI for audiometry and for sales of hearing aids. A good idea to do this speech test first. And it sets up the level at which to do later hearing tests. Regular MCL for average conversational speech. What did we say? 55 to 60 dB HL, 60 to 70, 65 to 70 decibels SPL. And is MCL always in the middle of one's dynamic range? Not always. In some hearing aid fittings, it ain't. The target for average speech is usually about a third above the hearing levels, but we'll get more to that later on. The thing about MCL is, when you're first testing someone's hearing, you're going to find that it's artificially low, especially for the person who's never worn hearing aids before. So you're going to get somebody with a mild to moderate sensory neural loss. Okay, and I'll show you on the screen what I mean. I'll share a screen and I'll show you a picture of the audiogram of what I'm talking about. Let's just go here, up, 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 here. Take a look at this guy. Sloping, high frequency hearing loss. If he's never worn hearing aids before, first time ever, do you think his MCL, look where my cursor is, do you think his MCL is going to be right around here? His MCL is going to be around here. In other words, he's used to straining to hear. He's used to it because he hasn't worn hearing aids before. So he's always straining to hear. So soft speech sounds normal to him. And then you're going to do his speech discrimination testing. And guess what? He's going to suck. He's going to do badly. And then you know what I would do? I would do MCL plus 10. Here you go. Read this with me. Interesting thing about MCL, usually it's artificially low for someone who with sensory neural hearing loss who's not worn hearing aids before. For example, mild to moderate sloping sensory neural loss. They'll show an MCL close to normal. And you're going to be thinking, how's that possible? Well, guess what? After some time of wearing hearing aids, you'll notice that his MCL has increased. The client is no longer straining to hear. So this is why I always tell people, do word discrimination at his claimed artificially low MCL here, and he will suck. He will do terrible. Then do it again with a different word list, and do it at MCL plus 10. So if his MCL is 65, come in at 75 and read another word list. And guess what? He's going to do way better. And that is actually part of the sale of hearing aids, because he's going to notice it, and you're going to go, see, when you can hear a lot easier, your whole recognition of speech is better. Look at how much better you did the second time than you did the first time. You're straining to hear all the time. With hearing aids, you won't need to strain to hear all the time. It'll take the chain off your brain, bro. You're going to like it a whole lot better. Anyway, let's just look at where we are in our notes, make sure we're watching. So, mirror the audiogram with full-on gain? You can't, especially not with linear hearing aids of yesterday. Not with the reduced dynamic range, because the ceiling is the same as normal. It's just the floor that isn't. So if you give all the hearing loss back with, let's say, a 50 decibel linear hearing aid, your output for soft inputs like 5 dB will be all right, but outputs for speech will exceed uncomfortable loudness level. Now here's a guy who lived in a van down by the river, and he came from Texas, and he's the father of our fitting methods. So have a look. His name was Sam Berger, and he used trial and error when fitting people with hearing aids with sensory neural loss. He thought, like I would have thought, he tried to do this. Where am I here? He tried to do this. He tried to amplify soft sounds by the full degree of the loss, thinking, hey, I want to make the guy's thresholds 0. I mean, doesn't that just make sense? If I've never fit hearing aids before, I'd be thinking, yeah, I want to improve this guy's hearing thresholds so that they become 0. Okay, well, if you do that, if I want to improve the guy's hearing thresholds to become 0, I'm going to really have to amplify a lot to make those thresholds 0. Think about it this way. If I'm testing someone, actually, I think I'll stop sharing screen here for just a second, and I want to advance to a slide that will help make this clear. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Come on, there you go, here you go. Here's a guy's hearing loss under headphones, okay? Then I take the headphones off, and now I put hearing aids on the guy, and I crank up the hearing aids, and if I improved the guy's thresholds so that they were 0, so pretend I'm doing that. I've tested the guy under headphones, and his thresholds are now 30 to 40 to 50 to 60. Then I take the headphones off, lay them on a table, put hearing aids on the guy's ears, and set them in front of a speaker, and let warble tones come out of the speakers, because you can't put headphones on top of hearing aids. It's not going to work. So you have him sitting in front of a speaker, and he's listening to sounds coming from the speaker, and I want to retest his hearing thresholds. I'm testing his hearing thresholds a second time. And I've cranked up the hearing aids so that now his thresholds are at 0. So that these A's would all be at 0. Aided threshold, aided threshold, aided threshold, aided, aided, aided. That might be fine for soft input sounds. If I did that, okay, that would, and follow me with the slide here, that would accomplish, keep going, I'm almost there, that would accomplish what you see on the left and right here. It would make soft sounds, like 5 dB sounds, 0 dB sounds, 10 decibel sounds. It would make all of those soft sounds above the guy's hearing thresholds. Or go to the right audiogram, it would lift up those soft sounds right where they belong. That would be perfect if all input sounds were soft. The trouble is you can't do that, because if you do that, you will be given too much gain for speech, because speech isn't 5 or 10. Speech is 50 to 60 decibels hearing level, 60 to 70 SPL. So I cannot add the gain that matches the whole hearing loss, or I'll blast him to kingdom come. So what Sam Liebarger found was he could only give half gain. And if you look at this, half gain, what he did was he measured the guy under headphones, got the hearing loss that you see in front of you, took off the headphones, put the hearing aid on the guy, and set him in front of a speaker and retested his thresholds, but he amplified so that he improved the thresholds by half. And that's why these letter A's are not at 0. The target of his fitting method was half gain. So if he matched or met his target of half gain, he was happy, because guess what? That meant that speech coming in would be sitting right there. You see what I'm saying? If I amplify input speech, which is 50 to 60 decibels, okay, and I amplify it by half the degree of his loss, namely 20 to 30, then my output will sit here, nicely in his dynamic range. Input plus gain is output. I plus G is O. So if my input is speech, and I amplify by half the degree of his hearing loss, then my output hitting the eardrum, okay, will sit nicely in the middle of his dynamic range, between his floor, follow my cursor, between his floor and his ceiling, LDL for speech. Okay, that's the idea behind the half gain rule. And the half gain rule is like a spinal cord. It underlies like a river. It underlies all hearing aid fitting methods today, completely, utterly, and totally. So now let's go to our writing here. What we have, Liebarger. Let's just read what we've got here. With full gain for hearing loss, people always reduced the volume. And what do I mean by that? He would set the person down. Let's say the person had a 60 decibel hearing loss. He intuitively thought, oh, I better give 60 dB of gain because he has a 60 dB hearing loss. So he would put the hearing aids on the guy, and the guy's getting 60 decibels of gain, and Sam Liebarger would stand a Texas yard away from the guy and say, now I'm going to talk to y'all in a normal loudness, and I want y'all to turn the volume where you think it sounds right. And the person invariably turned it down halfway. That's where the half gain rule came from. Okay? He thought intuitively, let me give the whole hearing loss back. So if the person had a 60 decibel hearing loss, he'd amplify by 60 decibels, stand a yard away from the guy and talk normally and say, I want you to turn the volume of your hearing aid until it sounds right. And the guy would do this. Sam Liebarger would look. Yeah, it's halfway. The guy turned it halfway down. And that's exactly where the half gain rule came from. Someone with 60 dB sensory neural loss actually wants 30 dB of gain. But they want that for speech inputs, not soft inputs, not loud inputs, average speech inputs. And then he would say he'd add about another 10 to 15 dB reserve gain so the guy could crank up the volume if he wanted to. And ideally, the trick was have the hearing aid volume about a half to 2/3 up. That means the guy's got a little bit of headroom. He's got a little bit of room to go up if he wants to. So basically, he'd give half gain and then a bit of reserve gain of around 10 to 15. So if the half gain was 30, the full-on gain would be 40 to 45. And that's the hearing aid prescription method. And that's the mother of all hearing aid prescription methods. This is the mother from whom they were all born. So how were analog hearing aids chosen? Half gain for the high frequencies, plus 10 or 15 reserve gain in case the guy wanted to turn up his hearing aid. A little bit less than half gain for the lows. And read what it says there, to prevent the upward spread of masking. Have a look-see here. I'll show you on the picture. Whoa! PowerPoint went weird. Look at how the A's on the left here are not halfway up. See how this A here is only 10 dB above the threshold? That's what I mean by a little bit less than half gain for the very low frequencies. Because remember what you learned in acoustics. Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. The rumbling of a truck covers the peeping of a canary better than the loud peeping of a canary covers the rumbling of a truck. Okay? And most background noise is low frequency. And what do you want to hear? The high frequency consonants. Okay, so the low frequency background noise is especially effective at masking the high frequencies that are so important for understanding speech. So a little bit less than half gain for the low frequencies, half gain for mid to high frequencies, and add a little bit of reserve gain should the guy want it. Now, just so you and I know, most hearing aids today don't have volume controls. If they do have a volume control, it'll be on the handheld remote control. And you know why that is? In one word, compression. Because compression isn't linear gain. Compression gives more than half gain for soft sounds, about half gain for average sounds, and less than half gain for loud sounds. So the guy doesn't have to constantly adjust his volume control all the time. Okay, but just so you know, the earmark, so to speak, of linear hearing aids, and you'll remember from 240, linear hearing aids gave the same gain for all inputs. So if you made the linear hearing aid give perfect half gain for speech, you did right, that was your target. But if you spoke really softly, the guy would have to turn it up. And if you started to talk loud, you'd have to turn it down. But you spoke at a normal, comfortable loudness level, and with half gain, the sound was just right. So you could always tell a linear hearing aid wearer by the fact that he's always adjusting his volume. Today, we use compression, and you might have a handheld volume control and a handheld program changer, but the guy isn't constantly fussing around with that volume control as much because hearing aid compression automatically changes gain depending on the input level. That's why compression used to be called AGC, automatic gain control, AGC. More than half gain for soft sounds, half gain for average sounds, less than half gain for loud sounds. So a whole ball of wax in this thing. All right. We'll go to our notes here again, see how far we got. And then UCL, loudness discomfort, hearing aids measured in SPL, okay, hearing loss is measured in dBHL, right? And the average difference, now looky, here comes Cookie. Look very, very carefully at the screen here because I'm going to show you what I mean here. Go way back, way back, way back, and even further to the slide that I want. Here, look at that blue line. The average distance that blue line is above the zero here, the average distance is around 10 to 15 dB, that average difference. And so that is why Berger said, okay, let's just make sure then that for UCLs, we're going to add about 10 to 15 dB to change HL into SPL. It's because of that difference. Okay, so if your UCL was 100 you'd choose a maximum power output of about 110, 115. If your loudness discomfort was 90, then you'd choose a maximum power output of 100 to 105. Because hearing aids are read in SPL, people are tested in HL. And to change HL into SPL, we add about 10 to 15 dB. And we do that to set what's the maximum power output of the hearing aid going to be. And now you've chosen the gain, half gain and a little bit less than half gain for the low frequencies. And you want the guy to have a little bit of reserve gain, 10 to 15. So this here, this paragraph right here, I would write in your margin, that's the mother and father of all hearing aid fitting methods. That's it. That is itsky-pitsky. Okay, a very important concept to digest. If we're going to talk about any of the other fitting methods, this is the central concept behind everything. So, in the old days when fitting methods were being invented, okay, the great compromise was reached with the half gain rule. So, I'll show you in terms of a picture here. We'll go to the picture here. Scroll down. Whoa, we went down a little bit too far. Go back up, go back up. Here you go. Linear fitting methods. And next week as well, we're going to be talking about these early fitting methods. The week after, we're going to be talking more about today's fitting methods, okay? But today, we're going to be talking about early fitting methods. Half gain rule. Linear circuits were state-of-the-art. Same gain for all input levels. You can't mirror an audiogram with full linear gain. You'll get too much output at high inputs. Berger found people preferred half gain. He used trial and error with sensory neural loss. The half gain rule is still in use. It's the basis of today's threshold-based fitting methods. And here's the kicker in our field. No method has been proven to be the best. And again, that brings us right back to where we started at the beginning. The ear versus the eye. It's the nature of damage to the end organ of hearing. It's the fact that the retina of the ear itself is damaged. That's why we have fitting methods, plural, instead of the right fitting method. There's a lot of them have in common the half gain rule, but there's all little variations. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So here's linear hearing aids. In this case, it's 60 dB of gain, but it doesn't have to be. 0 in, 60 out, 20 in, 80 out, 40 in, 100 out, 60 in, 120 out. So on that yellow 45-degree angle line, the gain is always 60, 60, 60, 60. And then they clipped the peaks to make sure no more than 120 came out. Okay, that's how early hearing aids worked. So you'll take this fact, okay, linear hearing aids, number one, and you add to it this fact, reduced dynamic range for sensory neural hearing loss. And what do you get? Half gain method. 1 plus 2 is 3. That's where we are. That's what happened. That's where this all came into play. 1970s, 1980s, okay, this is what was done. They had linear hearing aids. Sensory neural losses always had reduced dynamic range. Hearing aids were based on the half gain fitting method. The main idea, okay? You had 4 children born from this half gain method. Number 1, Berger. It's the oldest of the kids. Came from Kent State University in Ohio. Berger, he's passed away now. I don't know about Hagberg and Rain, but Berger is the main author. And look what he did. At 250, he gave 0.45 of gain. At 500 hertz, half gain. Do you see that? And now at 1,000 hertz, more than half gain. At 2,000 hertz, more than half gain. At 3,000 hertz, more than half gain. And then at 4,000 hertz, half gain again. And then he gave that reserve gain of 10 dB that we've talked about. Okay? Now, he really favored 1 and 2,000 hertz. Look where I'm highlighting. His favorite frequencies were these. He had a reason for that. His reason was the speech banana. If you look here, you'll see 100 dots. Each dot represents 1% of audibility necessary to recognize what the word was. And look where the dots are mostly clustered together. 2,000 hertz. Okay? 1,000 and 2,000 up to 4. So right in this area that I'm highlighting. Whoa, don't move the whole dang screen, Ted. Okay, I'm going nuts here. Just move it here. Okay. This whole area that I'm circling with my cursor, look where the dots are clustered together. Well, that's what Berger chose to amplify the most, because most cues for understanding speech were found in these high frequencies. Okay? That's why Berger gave so much gain to between 1 and 4. Now, if you go to the second fitting method, came out in 1983. Pogo. Has nothing to do with a pogo stick, okay? Prescription of gain and output. It's the second method to come out. And look what it did. It said, no, Berger, we don't really agree with you. We think we need more gain and most gain at 4,000 hertz, okay? But you're giving too much gain at 1 and 2. We don't think you should give as much. See, both of them are based on the half gain rule. It's just that now they're just getting different wrinkles. Just slightly, they're just massaging that rule a little bit. They're just kind of tweaking it. So Berger said, okay, half gain is great, but I'm going to give a little bit more than half gain right here. See that? I'm going to deliberately do that because I believe in that. That's my faith. That's my philosophy. And Pogo comes out and goes, nah, we don't think so. Here in Utah, we have a different philosophy. We like the half gain rule all right, just like you do, but we think you give too much gain at 1 and 2. We think you should concentrate on the high frequencies the most. So lots of high frequency gain, it says here. Less mid and low gain. Slightly less than half gain for the lows to prevent the upward spread of masking. So basically half gain at all frequencies, but less than half gain at 250, and also less than half gain at 500 hertz. And again, of course, the good old reserve gain of 10 dB, so the guy could crank it up if he wanted to. Then came Libby. Now Libby was interesting. Libby had two philosophies. He said, no, you guys are all crazy. Mild to moderate sensory neural loss. So in other words, if I go to this picture here and show you mild to moderate loss, here, this guy here, mild to moderate loss, these guys don't want half gain. They want third gain. Third, not half. In other words, these letter A's should be all lifted just a little bit less. Follow my cursor. If you were redoing the guy's thresholds, you'd want his aided thresholds to be more like this. You're aiding a little bit too much. Most people with mild to moderate sensory neural loss don't really want half gain. They want less. And then another thought that Libby had was, Libby said, yeah, but there's something else I want to add here. Because people with severe loss, look at this, look what it says at the bottom. For severe sensory neural loss, they want 2/3 gain. They want more than half gain. And look at how he divides it. Look at the lines that are underlined in this slide. Sensory neural loss and neural sensory neural loss. Now, this is an important slide because you've heard me say this 1,000 friggin' times, okay? Sensory neural, it's the two words, sensory and neural, okay? Sensory is outer hair cell pathology, mild to moderate sensory neural loss. Later on, you get neural sensory neural loss. Now your inner hair cells are beginning to go. And remember the role of inner and outer hair cells. Outer hair cells help inner hair cells pick up soft sounds below 50. So if you have got outer hair cell damage, you're going to have a 50 decibel hearing loss. But if you have an 80 decibel hearing loss, that means that your outer hair cells are gone and now your inners are beginning to go. Okay? And what's the difference between outer and inner? Outers help inners pick up soft sounds below 50. Inners send all info to the brain. So without your inner hair cells, you're deaf. Okay? Inner hair cells are afferent. They send all info to your brain. So outers just help your inners pick up soft sounds. So if outers are damaged, 50 decibel hearing loss, mild to moderate. Inner hair cells are damaged, you're screwed. Now you've got terrible speech discrimination. Your speech discrimination is poor. And Libby was the one person who divided fitting methods into two. And he said, I'm going to give third gain for outer hair cell damage, 2/3 gain for inner hair cell damage. Because inner hair cell damage requires a lot of more gain because their speech recognition is poor. And these people need to hear everything that they can possibly get. So he's the only one, it seems to me, that seemed to divide sensory from neural. That's the interesting thing, I think, about Libby. Now, the last one I'm going to mention today is NOW. And NOW, National Acoustics Labs. Okay, National Acoustics Labs in Australia. NOW is the fourth child. Came after Libby, came after. Now take a look at this one. Look at the speech relationships of the letters here on the audiogram. You've all heard this from me before in acoustics and from other instructors, I'm sure. Vowels and any letter that uses the voice. Z. So look at here where I'm circling. Z, v, j, m, d, b, n, n, b. I, O, U, all your vowels, I, ya, wa, and all your voiced consonants, b, d, g, okay, m, all of those are louder and lower, okay? And then when you start getting ch, sh, k, s, those are higher and softer. So here's the relationship. Look at this relationship among adjacent speech frequencies. This is the way normal hearing people hear speech. Well, NOW said, we don't care. That may be the way normal hearing people hear speech. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Because when we amplify, we're going to make all of these speech sounds equally loud. We're not going to preserve this loudness relationship among speech frequencies. Screw it. We've decided we're not going to do that. So, read what it says here. NOW does not try to preserve loudness relationship among speech frequencies. Instead, it tries to make all speech frequencies contribute equally to the overall loudness of speech. So they take a different approach. So when you're looking at NOW, it gets a little bit tricky because NOW changed its mind a little bit. Now look at this slide here very carefully. The vertical axis is relative gain. This means pretend the guy has no hearing loss. Perfectly normal hearing. His thresholds are 0, 0, 0, 0 all across the board. Now the yellow and the white, the original NOW said, this is how much we need to reduce the lows, and this is how much we need to reduce the very, very highs of the speech banana to make all speech sounds equally loud. Later on in 1986, okay, 10 years later, look at this is 76, 10 years later, they changed their mind a little bit and said, you know what, we did overkill. We reduced the lows too much. Okay, let's reduce the lows a little bit less. And let's reduce the highs a little bit less to make all adjacent speech frequencies sound equally loud. You see, these curves are representing the reduction of gain in the very lows and a slight reduction of gain in the highs to make the speech banana flat. Okay, that's what they were trying to do. All right, and then now revised, now R, 10 years later, said, we did a little bit too much. Let's back off a little, Jack. Okay, so now R in English would provide a little bit more low frequency gain than the original now did. That's the main, that's what the difference between the two curves is. The original now said, we hear the lows way louder than the highs, so let's really reduce the lows. Now R said, yeah, that's still true, but don't go quite as far. All right. Now R, the revised one, stood for years, and it became the most popular girl on the block. Everybody had a crush on now R. It was used all over the United States, all over Canada, all over Europe. Now R ruled. And what it did was it used three things. This is how you calculate the targets of now R. Okay? This is how they prescribe gain and output. It's got three steps. Number one, take your parent-teachers association, pure tone average of 5, 1, and 2,000 hertz, and multiply that pure tone average by 0.05, or in other words, divide it by 20. Okay, keep that number. Number two, take each threshold and multiply each threshold by 0.31. In other words, divide it by 3. Thirdly, take away some of the low frequency energy, okay, especially in the lows, just like it's trying to tell you here. Reduce. This yellow line here, all I'm doing in that next slide is showing you how much. Reduce 250 by 17, reduce 500 by 8, reduce 750 by 3, add a little bit at 1 and 5, reduce a little bit in the very highs to flatten out that speech banana. So if you've done this one, and this one, okay, you have now come up with your NAL target for that fitting method. And your computer did it all. You didn't sit there adding this crap up. It was done automatically on your computer. So when you did real ear, okay, you just pushed a button. You entered the guy's audiogram into the real ear system. You chose your fitting method, whether it was Berger, Pogo, Libby, now. You chose your fitting method, you entered the guy's hearing loss in, and then you just pushed enter. And the computer went, brr, 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 brr. Okay, there's your target. Did you want your Berger target, your Libby target, your Pogo target, or your now target? And I showed you in each of the previous slides, this was Berger's target. That's how they came up with their target. Okay, and you had Pogo's target. That's how they came up with their target for any particular hearing loss. Libby had their own method of choosing targets, third gain or 2/3 gain, and now had these three steps that they added together to get their target for any particular fitting method. So look at now where we can end for today. Here's a sloping hearing loss. Look at the 4 different targets for that particular hearing loss. They're all based on half gain rule, but look at the variations among them. Berger, the most at 2,000 hertz. Libby, less in the mids, but still lots of high frequency gain. Pogo, I should say not Libby, Pogo, the plus signs. Here, Pogo, the plus signs. Less in the mids, still lots of highs at 4. Then you had Pogo, I should say Libby, the squares, third gain, third gain. And then look at now, the triangles. Okay, let's look at another loss. Here's a more precipitous high-frequency hearing loss. Once again, look at the variation among the four fitting methods. They're all from the same mother. They all came from Berger. They all came from half-gain rule. They're just variations. One's Roman Catholic, one's Protestant, one's blah, blah, blah. They're just different. They all believe in God. They just have different wrinkles to them. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to get across. This is a picture out of my little textbook, okay? A comparison of early, again, here's a mild to moderate sloping loss. Here's the variation among the fitting methods, all based on the half-gain rule. So I am going to suggest for reading, read compression for clinicians and read the third edition, okay, not the ugly brown book. It can't be that ugly brown book. It's got to be, it has to be this particular version, okay? And read chapter 4. And I'm really sorry, but you're going to hear my voice when you read chapter 4 because I'm talking right out of the book here. That's the coverage of the early fitting methods. So, meanwhile, behind the scene, real ear measures emerged. 1988. Keep in mind, the fitting methods didn't change, the targets didn't change, just the measuring changed. Instead of using functional gain, now they used real ear insertion gain. That's the difference. They slid a tube in your ear canal. We'll be covering this in real ear in the oncoming weeks. Tiny tube down the ear canal, and then they measured your real, look at the yellow, real ear unaided resonance. And then they held that tube in place and they put the hearing aid on, turned it to a comfortable volume, and now you're looking at the blue, real ear aided response. And real ear aided response minus real ear unaided response gave you real ear insertion gain. And did it match the target of your fitting method? Whether it was the half-gain rule, the Berger, the Libby, the Pogo, now, who cares? The point is, the fitting method targets didn't change. The method of measurement changed. Functional gain was behavioral. Client raised his hand when he heard the tones under headphone. Client raised his hand when he heard the tones with a hearing aid on. You did thresholds twice. Real ear, Client has no control over anything. You're measuring real ear unaided, real ear aided, and the difference, real ear insertion gain. This is functional gain. This is insertion gain. Fitting methods didn't change. Targets didn't change. Note has saying here too, target values are the same as the previous slide. The A's are exactly where the red line is. Exactly the same. Go ahead and compare after. You'll see. I'm trying to lay the point down that the methods didn't change, just the method of verifying. And that's what you're doing here. Is the hearing aid doing what you want it to do? You see, the fitting methods predict. Now you want to verify. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, you want to prove, is the hearing aid hitting target? Is it doing what you want it to do? And here, is it doing what you want it to do? Oh, it's going a little under here, a little over here, a little under, a little over, you know. Okay, so functional gain on the left, less than half gain in the lows, half gain, half gain, half gain, half gain. Insertion gain, look at how the numbers are identical. Okay, again, it's not the difference in the method per se, it's just the method of measurement. All right, and they all had one target because hearing aids in those days were linear. Same gain at all input levels. Now, if I ask you on a quiz or a midterm, linear hearing aids gave the same gain at all frequencies, true or false? you better say false, okay? Because they gave the same gain for all input intensity levels. Linear hearing aids, you could change the lows or the highs of them. Otherwise, all linear hearing aids would give a flat gain. That's not true. But they always had said one target, because your target was for average conversational speech. That was your most important. That's what your sound of concern was. That's what you wanted. All right. Here's a high frequency loss. Here's a target. And you can see that this hearing aid is over target in the mids, under target in the highs. Better go in and readjust the hearing aid so that it matches target. Then you have done your job. Then, like an old salmon, you can swim up the stream to die. You have spawned, you've given birth, you've done what you're supposed to do, okay? Anyway, that's what the hearing aid fitting does. The prescription methods predict what you should have, and then you need to verify with real ear, did you get what the fitting method said you'd get? Okay. With early real ear, we looked a lot at the ear canal resonance. Lots and lots at that. We don't as much anymore. But I've overgone my time, so I will stop right here. Look at your notes carefully. Next week, we'll go more into today's fitting methods and how they evolved from yesterday's fitting methods. I'll just ask for the fun of it here. Is this any different from the way that you learned fitting methods in 150?
Not a lot.
Good.
Some.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, it's good. I'm curious that way. It's good to really have it down in your head very well before we move on to real ear. So next week we'll concentrate on Go ahead. Yeah, good review.
It's excellent review. Yes.
All right, that's good. Next week we'll look more at NAL-NL1, NAL-NL2, and DSL5 especially. So we'll concentrate on today's fitting methods and how they evolved. All right, I'd be done. I'm going to stop recording. I need a coffee bad.